Definitely. Well, I want to thank you all for having me here today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation about immigration reform. And for me, this is actually a really personal story. My parents came to this country as immigrants in the 70s and the reason why my mom ended up getting her immigration passed, and people are going to think this is so crazy, is because of Ronald Reagan. So the first vote that she ever had in this country coming from Nigeria was for a Republican, and then she never voted for a Republican ever again. But I think that does show you where we've gone in this country. Really, for a while, both sides of the aisle agreed that having immigrants in the country was a net benefit because not only were they an economic benefit to our country, but culturally, people loved going to their neighborhoods, trying new foods, experiencing new culture. And so it was an obvious benefit. And so what we've seen really in the last, I'd say, really since Trump came down that escalator in 2016, is so much demonization of immigrants. And what I think Democrats have done is they've ran away from the fight because it's a tough conversation to have, and you need an effective messenger to come out and say, here's the deal. Immigrants make our country stronger, but we can't have a chaotic system that seems like it's disorganized. Let me give an example. So the Biden administration really was trying to, I think at the beginning, try to make an immigration system that worked and made sense. But what you saw happen is they did not manage the amount of people that were coming in the country. And then when you had really, in my opinion, frankly, racist governors in the South busing migrants to northern states, sending them to states that weren't able to deal with the influx, you really saw a sort of cultural clash. I actually wouldn't say cultural clash. I'd say, frankly, resource competition happening in places like Chicago and Philadelphia. For example, in Chicago, there was a hospital in Chicago in a Black community that had not been invested in years. Black residents were constantly asking the federal government, we want to fix this hospital. We want to get it fixed. And then what happened when you had this new influx of migrants coming into the community, the federal government immediately showed up. They built all these new buildings, and you had Black folks in this community saying, hey, we've been asking for help for years. It's not showing up. And then someone like Donald Trump shows up and says, see, this is why the government doesn't listen to you, is because they're focused on immigrants. They're not focused on you. And then it creates this divide. And that's
Yep.
exactly what we saw happen in the 2024 election. So what I want Democrats to do is not to fall into Donald Trump's frame and say, yep, we agree with Donald Trump. We agree with Donald Trump. And we say that, that immigrants are taking all the resources, they're taking all the jobs. What they need to really articulate is that our country has enough for everyone to thrive and for everyone to succeed. And we need to have a immigration system that's orderly, that respects the rule of law, but also make sure that people's human rights are respected. And that's what Donald Trump is definitely not doing. So I think Democrats have an opportunity here to articulate a system that respects laws and respects the laws that are on the books, also makes sure that people's human rights are respected, but doesn't fall into Republican framing. And I think a lot of Democrats, because they don't want to articulate this future, are unfortunately falling into the Republican framing on immigration.
Yeah, that's the top line, and there's cowardice. So instead, they decide to go Republican-lite. And I want to drill down on specifics. And well, let's take the DeLorean back to Reagan for a second. I think it's important. Uh, wasn't it Reagan who said the word amnesty, Rotimi?
Yep, he did. He did say that. Yeah,
And
and
go
I
ahead.
mean, I think it just shows, there's a lot to kind of talk about. I think one can debate what figures were instrumental in pushing the Republicans in that direction. Some say Buchanan, some say, Rush Limbaugh. I think they all played a little role in slowly rolling the ball towards xenophobia in the Republican Party. But I think Reagan, the Republicans at that time, understood that immigrants are a net benefit because they saw the way that the country has always welcomed immigrants in, and it's ultimately made the country greater.
Yeah, and also George W. Bush. I mean, Reagan was a terrible president. George W. Bush was a terrible
Yeah.
president. But we're trying to be fair here. Ronald Reagan listened to his own words about amnesty, right? And I think there was an ad recently that was shared by Democrats. Who shared that ad of Reagan's speech on immigrants and amnesty, and it just drove Donald Trump up the wall. If anyone remembers in the comment section, let me know. We usually have a very smart, informed audience here.
Hmm.
But it was also George W. Bush and the Bush Foundation that did that study that showed that immigration is a net positive to our economy. And there's some dark humor is if that Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush were to run for office as Republicans. Canada did it. Thank you so much. It was Canada. Thank you so much.
Mm. Yeah.
Canada did that ad, great ad, talking about Republicans being pro-immigrant, and then Donald Trump lost his mind, and then that post against Canada, right? Like threatening Canada with tariffs. Thank you so much, everyone. I love this crowd; they're so smart. But
Yeah.
I remember it was if Reagan and Bush ran for office as MAGA, they'd be rejected for being Muslim and immigrant lovers. Uh, Folks, I'm not making this up. Based on their comments about immigration, and Stephen Miller, folks, has openly said that George W. Bush and the neocons and all those people, they're rhinos. And all those people were like bureaucrats and elitists and cosmopolitans and globalists. And he threw them all under the bus basically around this issue because for them, it's very clear, Rotimi, that this is a white nationalist regime that is promoting white nationalist conspiracy theories. Do you recall a couple of weeks ago, actually last month, the Department of Homeland Security posted up a tweet, which is still up there, folks, with the word remigrate.
Hmm.
And that word is only used, folks, in white nationalist circles. That tweet is still up. And that word remigrate is a synonym for ethnic cleansing. Speaking
Hmm.
about, where the Republicans were on immigration and where are they now? Is it fair to say that the Republican Party, the MAGA movement right now, is white nationalist when it comes to immigration?
I 100% think that's true. And the reason why I think that can be seen is when you look at really who they want as immigrants, when Donald Trump ran, it was mass deportations, no immigrants. And then a couple months into the presidency, you see Elon Musk, a billionaire, pick up the phone and say, Elon, I have my white family members from South Africa that want to come over. And Trump goes, we're going to have them all. No problem. Bring everyone in. And so that tells me that their idea of immigration isn't even really about, oh, can we get the most talented workers, the best and brightest to come in and make our economy stronger? It's how they look. And I think that is a really backwards way to think about the country. Um, I think as we advance in the country, I'd like to think that we get rid of these nativist ideas and can really have actually a civic nationalism that isn't based on race, that's based on us being humans and being American citizens. But it's just so sad the way that the Republicans of today have tried to drag the country back.
I think it's important that their immigration policy makes no sense. Racism is very stupid and self-destructive. And I'll give you an example. For those who don't follow this, like me and Rotimi, so they're anti-immigrants. They don't want people coming in, but they made an exception for South African whites based upon a lie, a white supremacist lie about a white genocide that is not happening. And then Elon Musk has been saying this for 6 years, and he has the ear of the president. And when the South African president came, Donald Trump repeated the slide, which was so shameful, and he kind of laughed at it and mocked it. But nonetheless, as they're literally kicking out people, as they're deporting even citizens, children, kidnapping brown men, sending them to die in an El Salvador prison like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, this country welcomed these South African white refugees. And then last month, this country put a cap at the amount of refugees that could come into this country. I think for Biden it was 150,000. For Americans now it's 7,500, and they made an exception for white refugees. Right? They're Syrian refugees, Afghan refugees, Gaza refugees. No, no, no. Sudanese refugees. No, no, no. So they're actually pro-immigrant, but only pro-white immigrants. Right? They want to get rid of birthright citizenship. They're trying. Donald Trump has asked the Supreme Court. Right? Stephen Miller said that the Immigration Nationality Act, which helped my parents come to this country, was the worst thing that ever happened. Right. And now, Rotimi, have you followed the kind of MAGA civil war on H-1B visas? All
Yes,
right.
I was
So
actually just
I
thinking
just want
about
you to
that.
all to
Yeah.
know that this is how dumb they are. This is how self-destructive it is. Talk to people about the MAGA war on H-1B visas.
So essentially, there are really two parts of the MAGA movement. There's one part that is really a I don't like kind of want to say cosmopolitan cult, like corporate backed. They're basically Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan bankers, and some are tech bros. And so they like H-1B visas because they want to have the best and the brightest folks here so they can make millions of dollars and ultimately increase their bottom line. And then there's another side of the MAGA movement, which I like to call the Groypers, and so for folks who don't know, that's Nick Fuentes. Those are really far white nationalist folks, despite the fact that Nick Fuentes is part Hispanic. His last name's Fuentes, but we can dive into that another time. They basically want to see zero immigration. I've interacted with some of these people online because I write about immigration, And the big point they make is they say they would like to see no immigration for 3 or 4 generations in this country, essentially because they think there's a browning of America, which is just very much white nationalist nativist language. And so what you're seeing right now is this debate in the MAGA movement because Donald Trump really was elected to the Republican nomination because of both factions. But at the end of the day, he is a corporate guy. He's a businessman. He said it many times. He had H-1B visas, people with H-1B visas working at Trump Tower, working for his businesses. So he's kind of like, I just want the smartest people here that can help me make the most money. And there's another part of the movement that are like, we want whites only. And so what he's done is really he's kind of sitting in the middle of this movement, kind of going back and forth, kind of just saying whatever people like, because that's frankly what he's always done. And so as you think as the if you think of the future of the MAGA movement, you look at someone like JD Vance. What is interesting about JD Vance is his whole kind of political ideology and his political coming into being is based on the support of the right side of the Groypers movement. Because if you look at when he was originally coming into politics, he wrote the book Hillbilly Elegy, which is sort of like arguing for a more nativist creed of America. When JD Vance says that my family is in the blood and soil of this country, he's not just talking about, oh, they like helped build some of the first buildings. It's like nativist. It's basically plausible deniability if we're talking about racism. And so what I think is interesting to see is now as the Republicans continue to think of a life post-Trump, what are they going to do with immigration? Are they actually going to embrace some of these corporate guys and say, oh, we only want the best and the brightest? Or are they going to really take the full JD Vance or Nick Fuentes Groypers view of no immigration ever, like multiple generations? We're not going to see any immigration. So there's this tension in the party right now with H-1B visas and really nativism.
Yeah, and let's just dive a bit deeper into this. Two things. First, let's talk about the H-1 visas. I've been tracking it for about 10 years because there was a conversation when Donald Trump was first running for office, an interview between him and Steve Bannon, where Steve Bannon talked to him about exactly these H-1B visas. He goes, well, Steve, I know some of these Asians, they're very smart, blah, blah, blah. And then Steve Bannon just made up numbers, and he goes like, well, there's also something about, I feel like it's Jabba the Hutt whenever I see Steve Bannon. There's also
Mhm.
something about civic identity and 30%, he just made up this number, 30% of tech CEOs are now South Asians. And what about civic identity, which was, a euphemism for basically, again, making America white again. So you saw the tension between those who make money, even Elon Musk. Elon Musk got the wrath of a lot of MAGA in the last couple of years ago because he's like, we need these H-1B visas because Americans are too dumb. He straight up said it. He said, you white Americans are too dumb, and my companies in Silicon Valley run because of these smarter like immigrants who come on the H-1B visa. So now Donald Trump's way around it is, okay, it's a grift. How do I make money off this? Oh, yeah. If you give me $100,000, then I'll fast
Mhm.
track you to the H-1B visa. So basically, pay me $100,000 and you'll get the H-1B visa, right? So people don't have that money. So what's happened as a result is now you're seeing a brain drain, a brain flee, right? So people are not like no longer coming to America. Those people are being actively poached by China, by Europe, by Japan, actively, folks. They're like, oh, America's cutting your research grant, come to me. Oh, America's not paying you to do cancer research, come to me. Oh, AI and technology, come to me, right? So now all these people are literally going to China, Japan, and Europe, all these brilliant immigrants who are here or are on their path here. And they're like, oh, America's no longer friendly. We'll just go to the other country. So it's harming us in that way. And then furthermore, the way it'll harm MAGA and it's dividing MAGA, because I just think this is beautiful in the worst way possible.
Exactly.
Can you tell us? There's two names I want to bring up:
Mhm.
Usha Vance and Dinesh D'Souza. Rotimi, can you please? Because eventually they're going to have to deal with this. Let's just go one after another. Usha, let's talk about Usha first and JD Vance.
So obviously Usha Vance, JD Vance's wife, second lady of the United States, and clearly any time, and I encourage people to do this, go look at any time that JD Vance posts a picture of his family with his wife on Twitter. Go to the comments. I guarantee you, half of the comments are far right white nationalists saying, you are an embarrassment to your race. You're an embarrassment to the Trump administration. We didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for the browning of America. These are the things they say. And so I think when you see someone like Usha Vance, you also have to remember that if you look at her background, when she went to Yale Law, she's a part of the Federalist Society. That's a right-wing conservative movement. She interned for a conservative Supreme Court justice. So she's been a part of
This
really
is
the
who she
Republican
is.
movement.
It's so important that you said that.
Exactly.
People are like, poor
hmm
Usha. I'm like, nope, this is who she is. Continue.
She knew what's no, she knew what she was doing. And so like part of me, I guess I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night at dinner, and he was like, well, maybe, she went into it thinking that she was becoming like a Bush Republican or a Reagan Republican, and then essentially her husband just became this like nationalist, and she kind of just realized she had to join along for the ride. But part of me feels like at some point you kind of just sign up for what your partner is doing and the radical ideas that they're subscribing to if you go into politics like that. And I think for her, this is essentially her political ideology. And there's no denying that she has essentially become complicit in what JD Vance is pushing. And I think on the other side, when you see a guy like Dinesh D'Souza, who has been a long time Republican operative, also when you go look at his comments, anytime he posts his family, the same exact thing from white wing ring nationalists saying, "Oh, like you're embarrassing. You should have never been a part of the conservative movement." I think it's different from him. It's different from Usha, excuse me, because he's actively played a serious role in so many conservative campaigns. He's been an advisor, a speechwriter. He helps build their campaigns, and so he's actually like built the infrastructure to create a lot of the conservative movement today. And what I think is so interesting is he's created this whole thing, and now they're saying you can't be it anymore. You can't be a part of this anymore, And so I think it just shows what happens when you have sometimes people of color that think just because they join in these circles that will make them safe. It doesn't make them safe in any way. You're only just complicit in the type of things that these far right radicals are doing.
And it's beautiful because they're all getting dragged. Dinesh D'Souza is a South Asian man, a desi chicken for Colonel Sanders, who has given his entire life to the conservative movement. In the last 2 weeks, he has expressed outrage and shock on Twitter that anytime he posts something, the Groyper movement says, "Go back to India. You're an invader." He goes, "This isn't the Republican Party. I knew what." No, this was always the Republican Party. Now the leopards are eating your brown face. And now there's also JD Vance. The Groypers have gone after him. They do not relent. Why did you marry a Hindu? Why do you have biracial kids who are replacing us? That's Nick Fuentes. They do not relent. They've said openly, we're going to go after JD Vance until he renounces his Hindu wife, until he explains why he has biracial kids named Vivek, until he explains, his connection to Peter Thiel and Palantir, and until he goes America first. So it's really interesting. The only way that JD Vance, with the immigration policy of Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, Nick Fuentes, and these white nationalists, you have Dinesh D'Souza and his family. Oh, yeah, his white son in law married to his biracial daughter, throwing immigrants under the bus, who's an elected official. And the rest of us, myself included, say, "Isn't your wife Indian American and your father in law Indian?" Never responds to me. JD Vance, isn't your family that loved you and embraced you all immigrants, right, who speak another language? And then you have Nikki Haley's brown son, Nepo baby, Nalin Haley. Nalin, I don't know. He said that the United States should stop foreign aid and bar legal immigration. He's saying this as a brown man with Nikki Haley as his mom, with a grandfather who came thanks to the Immigration and Nationality Act, where he came from Canada to the United States and got a job as a professor at a historically black college. How do they think they can escape this, Rotimi?
I think that they think they can escape this because one, they're in the club. I think it's almost the way that a lot of these people function is I like that, or the way that I think about it is they still think they're in middle school or high school where, when you see a group of people bullying people, and if you think that if you jump in with them and bully and, you start pushing someone around that looks different from everyone, they'll basically let you join the club. And what has happened is none of that. They haven't been given full status into this secret group, or not even secret, just like the Republican elite club, because of how they look and because the whole idea of this movement is based on identity. It's based on race. And so what I think is important to acknowledge, especially with people like this, is that It's all about power for them. It's all about grabbing and maintaining power. And they're willing to throw anyone under the bus to do it. They're willing to throw their family members under the bus. They're willing to throw people that look like them that could have been their brother, sister, aunt, and uncle under the bus. And it's really just sad.
And there's also Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm sure you've seen the videos of him getting trolled by groypers as he's running for office, saying, "You're a Hindu. This is a Christian country. Why should we vote for you?" And he's like, and he probably internally he's just crying because he can't escape it, right? But then speaking about Democrats trying their best to be Republican-lite on this issue, thinking that they can survive by punting on this issue, thinking that people will accept him if they just go along with the Republicans and throwing the immigrants under the bus. I keep receipts, Rotimi. I remember after Donald Trump won less than a year ago, Democrats threw the woke under the bus, the woke, which is people of color. Gavin Newsom's first guest on his podcast was Steve Bannon. The second guest was Charlie Kirk. I remember it was Democrats, both in the House and the Senate, that voted with Republicans for the Laken Riley Act, thinking that this will help them. Can you remind people about the Laken Riley Act and what it did?
Definitely. So the Laken Riley Act is a piece of legislation that essentially completely rewrote a lot of the laws that we have regarding immigration, particularly giving federal prosecutors and the federal government more jurisdiction to go into states and to deport people. Because right now, excuse me, before that, what we had is sort of a lot of criminal issues are based at the locality. So let's say a crime happens in your community, it starts with the local DA. And then if it's more serious, it ends up with the federal government. But what they did is they essentially rewrote a lot of the immigration policy, so much so that when you have someone that gets caught up in whether it's a small crime or really anything, it immediately goes to the federal government and they can begin expedited removal, which means that if you are going to be deported, usually what has to happen is you have to have a trial. It's a pretty quick trial in front of a federal immigration judge. You get a public defender, and what they do is they adjudicate your case. You get due process rights. But what the Lake and Riley Act did is essentially expanded expedited removal so people can be removed quickly without their due process rights. So you could literally have, and we're seeing this now, someone that's been here for 10 years that's on a visa. And because of the Lake and Riley Act, it is essentially made the deportation process so much faster. And they're now just gone like that, and there's no due process at all.
And yeah, without any convictions, right? Just for
Mhm.
misdemeanors, for like
Yes.
allegedly stealing a candy bar. And the Democrats said, okay, we'll help you. And it could not have passed without Democratic support in the House and the Senate, folks. I want you to remember that. Also, as this was happening, I keep receipts. Democrats were originally mum about Republicans and this administration straight up kidnapping brown men, 230 brown men with tattoos, kidnapping them without due process and send them to die in a prison. I always keep the receipts. So there was only one Democrat who went, Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, because Kilmar Abrego Garcia was his constituent. And it was very brave, folks. He said, I'm going to go to El Salvador. I'm not going to leave until I get proof of life of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was the only one who went, Rotimi. And I recall, as a result of him keeping that story in the news and messaging on it, then corporate media, mainstream press was, forced to cover Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and more people are like, this guy was here legally. This guy has a wife.
Don't know.
This guy has kids. A judge looked at the case and said, yeah, he shouldn't be deported. He's been here for 5 years. What the hell? Oh, and the immigration department admitted that it made a mistake in deporting him. What? Why the hell is he there? And keeping that in the news eventually brought Kilmar Abrego Garcia home. And folks, the GOP tried everything. They smeared him. They lied about him. Pam Bondi, Caroline Levitt straight up just lied. Kristi Noem lied about this man, making up all false accusations. But the reason why I bring that up is that it was coinciding with the Democrat, excuse me, the Trump administration also kidnapping pro-Palestinian activists. They straight up kidnapped Mahmoud Khalil. They kidnapped the Turkish grad student Romeza Ozturk in the middle of the street for writing an op-ed. And Democrats, overwhelming majority of them were quiet. Rotimi. So talk to us about the Democrats at that moment who said, "Oh, Donald Trump's strong issue is immigration. We're going to appear weak, so we'll just keep quiet on this."
Well, to me, it was just cowardice. There's no other word for it. It was weakness. It was cowardice. And also, it was this laziness and refusal to actually articulate what you believe. You know, I like to think that whoever these folks are, I can't remember the names of the folks that voted for this bill, but they got elected because they had unique ideas that meet their constituents' concerns. And people wanted those folks in office because they had new ideas about how to govern. And so the laziness of just saying, I don't want to go out and make my
Can I
case
tell
about
you?
something I
Can I tell you
don't
real
believe
quick?
in. Yeah.
Real quick. So the usual pieces of shit that I always call out, and some Democrats are like, vote blue no matter who. I'm like, nonsense. Some of the centrists who always voted for this, there's 12 Democratic senators, uh, Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, John Fetterman, Gallego, Maggie Husson, New Hampshire, uh, Mark Kelly, uh, who was it? Gary Peters, Jackie Rosen, Jean Shaheen, just Alyssa Slotkin, just some of the names.
No, exactly. And I think it shows an unwillingness to actually articulate a vision on immigration because you even see in the polls, people are movable. Nearly two-thirds of Americans think that what ICE is doing is wrong and disgusting. They think it's gross. They think it's scary. They're seeing pictures on TV of ICE agents going up to people and putting their guns in their face. There's a court deposition that was recently released the last week where a lawyer brought to light that a ICE agent went up to someone and said, "One more shot and you're dead, Lib."
I remember that.
Like that is something that most Americans see that and they are repulsed by. They're disgusted by that fact. I think also a big reason is that majority of Americans actually want to fight crime and they want to address crime in their community. And so when they're told by the administration, we're going to go after people that are bringing fentanyl into the community, we're going to go after people that are bringing drugs into the community. And then you see the administration saying, "Oh, we got a criminal and it's an 84-year-old lady who works at a restaurant down the street and she's a grandmother." That doesn't make sense to people. So people are really just becoming aware to the bullshit because they know that this is not what they wanted.
And also, not just, they see 79-year-old white man being tackled to the ground. They see kids are being zip tied. They're seeing ICE agents support Proud Boys. They're seeing people being terrorized. They're seeing a father seize as they're going after him as he's holding on to his child. They're like, we didn't vote for this shit. And folks, we still don't know the exact number of citizens that they've wrongfully deported, citizens that they've detained and deported, right? We've seen them tackle Senator Padilla, raise guns at Maxine Waters, arrest Mayor Baraka in New Jersey, right? So if you're an elected official getting treated like this, if you're a white man being treated like this, if you're a kid being treated like this, and now that there's a National Guard in DC and you got the military helping, and the Supreme Court has allowed for racial profiling to help these masked armed ICE agents, people are like, whoa, 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 we didn't vote for this. So to me, Rotimi, I'm at this point now where if you message proactively, you have a moment. You could say, ICE was created after 9/11. ICE did not exist in the 20th century. We had the Department of Education. You all got rid of the Department of Education. We had programs that you are gutting that have existed longer than ICE. And ICE does not do border patrol. Because a lot of people think you have to tell people. People think, oh, ICE does border patrol. No, it doesn't. ICE
Mhm.
doesn't do border patrol. And if ICE was supposed to help go after immigrants, how do you justify masked armed agents terrorizing our communities and going after our kids? We don't need ICE. ICE was created after 9/11. ICE is no longer serving its purpose. ICE is being used and abused by the Trump administration as is Gestapo. We don't need ICE. We need something better. Why do they not message on this proactively, Rotimi? Am I wrong here? If I'm wrong,
No,
tell me.
so I think the biggest thing for me has been the reason why I wrote the piece that I just wrote is because I think it's important to start having that conversation. I wrote this piece basically talking to some policy experts that I knew that worked in the immigration field. There's been some really great research and scholarship on exactly how do you create an immigration system that works, and I looked at a lot of that. But what I wanted to do is say, hey, let me just write something that's detailed, that looks at the policy details of actually how do we create an immigration system that works. So this is one of the ideas I've had. So what the point of law enforcement is. Law enforcement exists to protect and serve communities. When you have law enforcement that is going in and harassing citizens, that are arresting people that shouldn't be arrested, that is putting so much fear in communities, that a recent story came out from Chicago that people were so afraid of ICE that now, when there's actually real crime happening in their communities, there's actually like people that are dealing drugs, people that are committing violent crime, they're afraid to actually go report it. So the administration is actually allowing crime to flourish and allowing crime to get worse because people don't want to talk to law enforcement. So when you have an agency that has lost trust completely, it can no longer exist anymore because it can't even function because there's no trust. So what I've decided that Democrats should try to do is essentially create two new agencies that are focused on immigration. The first being one that is actually focused on transnational and international crime. There is a reality that fentanyl has been coming into the United States for the last 20 years. But the fact of the matter is that most fentanyl is trafficked in the United States by 80% of it by American citizens. So, what actually needs to happen is that we need an agency that's actually focused on finding where drugs are coming into the country and prosecuting it, taking this to court, putting it in front of a judge and say, hey, we have evidence of this happening. We want to hold these people accountable. And that should not be connected to making sure that we're taking the time to watch immigrants that are coming to the country because they're two separate projects. And so I think at the same time, we need another agency. And I've talked to some immigration advocates about this. They said, why don't we have an agency that's actually focused on processing people in the country, bringing people into the country that should be here, adjudicating these claims, and making sure that people are getting their due process rights? So having an agency that's actually focused on that, putting people in front of federal judges, giving people federal public defenders so they can actually get their claims adjudicated. So then people say, oh, I'm going to get an answer quickly about my American citizenship. They actually don't want to come illegally. They'll say, hey, I'll come the right way. I'll come illegally. Because what is happening right now in this country is because the legal process is so difficult and so impossible, and there's such a backlog. People are more interested in these illegal routes that come into the country. So what I really think needs to happen is if a Democrat can talk about how we actually want to have two separate agencies to ultimately make our immigration system stronger, the Americans that in places like Pennsylvania that are rightly concerned about fentanyl and drugs coming into their community are going to say, okay, a Democrat has a solution to make sure that we're not having crime, we're not having drugs coming into my community. So I want to vote for that person. And then Democrats that are actually, and majority of Americans that are rightly concerned about the injustice that ICE are committing are to say, wow, we actually have a real immigration department for the first time that is focused that are making sure that people are coming to the country the right way and giving people their due process right. So that's really the way that I think Democrats can talk about creating a new immigration system.
I mean, I think so because that's the reality. Crime always sells, and Democrats have always tried to be Republican-lite on crime and thrown communities of color and immigrants under the bus. Folks, Bill Clinton did it. Joe Biden did it, right? The mandatory minimum sentences, right? That was the Democrats, right? Throwing Sister Souljah under the bus. That was the Democrats, right? When it came to the Laken Riley Act, that was 12 Democrats who helped pass it, right? If you've noticed, the issue that they always sacrifice is immigration reform. They keep punting it, punting it, punting it. And I've been saying you can't keep punting this. This is going to bite you in the ass. And voila, it's now biting all of us in the ass. This is the result of Democrats. I'm sorry. You have to be blunt. I try to be very honest, and I hold everyone to account. Democrats always trying to prove tougher on crime than the Republicans, always going Republican-lite, trying to win over the Republican base, and the Republicans laugh at them and say, you're weak, you're gay, you suck, right? And their own base saying, why are you throwing us under the bus? Shut up. Are you going to vote for us or are you going to vote for that Donald Trump? All right, I guess we'll just hold our nose and vote for you, right? But you can't do it anymore. I think now people are like, we have massed armed ICE agents. We're going to have the budget of countries, right? Once this big, beautiful bill passes that give billionaires permanent tax cuts and guts Medicaid. Another aspect of this that doesn't get enough attention, I've always tried to bring it up on the left hook, is that they have funded ICE to the tune where ICE, if it was a country, would have the 16th largest budget, right? So that a military budget. That's how much ICE is going to be funded. It's going to have the world's 16th largest military budget, and we're going to have 10,000 agents, and we're going to have new detention centers and new private prisons. Who's going to go in those private prisons and detention centers, Rotimi, right? And then you're going to have these
Hmm.
people who are never held accountable, essentially being unleashed, and Democrats who are going to be seen as weak on crime are going to back ICE. I think that's the wrong move. And I have no faith in the Democratic establishment based on everything that you've just said. I think you need someone to finally just throw the stick down and say, you know what? I'm going to test this out. Abolish ICE, replace it with X. Here's a pathway to citizenship for all the right people. Here's a system of accountability for ICE agents who are terrorizing people as Trump's Gestapo. And here's an idea of how to actually keep the border safe. And furthermore, here's an economic policy and a security policy with these Central American countries that can actually
Mhm.
help them, get their economy and their government back on track, which is a reason why so many people come from these Central American communities in the first place. Um, you have to have someone articulate that message proactively. And I think because of the Republican overreach, especially on ICE, with the commitment to white nationalism, with the racism, with the xenophobia, I think for the first time in a long time, Rotimi, people are open to it. Like I said before, Trump has made immigrants great again. It is the highest favorability rating of immigrants in like decades, folks. It's like plus 75%. So it's not like people are against immigrants. People are like, I like immigrants. Immigrants make my life delicious. I have an immigrant nanny. I have an immigrant chef. I have an immigrant worker. I know someone's an immigrant. My gardener is an immigrant. This is cruel. I'm against ICE going after these immigrant kids. Who who is articulating this, Rotimi, right now?
No one, and it's because they're afraid of actually having the debate. And that is kind of the most startling thing to me. There's a quote by one of my favorite political writers, and he always says that every good politician understands that a crisis is an opportunity. And for some
Absolutely.
reason, a lot of the Democrats that are running for president haven't realized this is a huge opportunity. You're seeing so many Americans say that they're frustrated with the status quo, that they want something new. So articulate something new. And I saw you retweeted this post I had yesterday. There was a pollster who was kind of bringing up the fact that in England, for folks who don't know, they've also kind of had a similar issue with immigration, where the far right in England has really weaponized a lot of cultural fears and a lot of economic fears and blamed it on immigrants. And what you saw is a popular left wing president basically just decide that they wanted to take all the right wing talking points, and it failed completely. So much so that it actually has made him so much less popular than he was before. And this is a very good example of
He's
why
talking about
just
you,
yeah,
Starmer. He's talking about you,
Keir
Starmer.
Starmer, for context. Yeah, sorry about that. Keir Starmer, in the UK, and it's just an example of how copying the Republicans on immigration never works. Because if someone says, "Oh, I will give you Coca-Cola, the real thing," and you offer generic Walmart Coca-Cola, they're obviously going to drink the real thing. No one wants generic fake bullshit. They want something new that inspires them, that addresses the problems they have in their life, the problems that they're seeing in their life. And what they're seeing is ICE is acting unjustly. And so Democrats actually have to articulate something new instead of copying Republicans. And the good thing for them is abroad in the UK with Keir Starmer is the example of what happens when you copy Republicans, and it goes poorly.
And folks, we mentioned this briefly, but now you have the fewest number of immigrants of color coming to America for the first time in years, and MAGA's gloating. If I'm a Democrat, I'm saying, okay, has this made the economy better? Has this
Nope.
solved your population crisis that you and your eugenic white nationalist buddies are so worried about? It's because of immigrants that the population isn't even dwindling faster, right? The total replacement number, total fertility rate for women is supposed to be 2.1 to keep the population balanced. At America and Europe now it's like 1.7, 1.6 people aren't having kids. The people having kids populating these now ghost towns where people are fleeing, bringing in workers, helping the economy, being entrepreneurs. It's immigrants, both here and in Europe. So now you can be like, all right, you achieved your dream. Congratulations. Fewer people are visiting. Fewer students are coming. Brain drain. Fewer immigrants are coming. Are you great again? Let's look. And you show these Rust Belt examples where they're the ones suffering the most, Rotimi. You have examples that elected officials can literally point to. Is like these, I'll give you Springfield, Ohio.
Mm,
Haitians who literally helped Springfield, Ohio, who were given
very
temporary
true.
protected status, who were entrepreneurs, who were a net benefit. You have all the data. They're now fleeing as a result of Republicans, Donald Trump and JD Vance, knowingly spreading white supremacist lies. The Wall Street Journal said that Vance and Trump, while they were running for office, president and vice president, were told that 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 the lie about Haitians eating dogs and pets was a bullshit. Despite being told it was bullshit, they still did it. Just like 2 weeks ago, JD Vance brought it up again. All right. So there were death threats against these Haitians. There were friggin' the members of the Patriot Front and Nazis coming to Springfield, Ohio. A lot of these people have fled. Has it hurt or helped Springfield, Ohio? It has hurt them. So I'm sitting here, Rotimi, after seeing all this, the cowardice of Democrats on this issue infuriates me. Like, because you're complicit. You're
Yeah.
complicit.
No, I have this thing that I kind of think about. It's called the immigration theory of everything. I think that immigration touches almost every political issue. And the reason why is you notice Republicans use immigration as a weapon to talk about how their economic ideas and solutions are going to make the economy better, but they never do. An example, um, I'm 29 years old. I just got engaged. I'm trying to start a family. Like many people my
Congrats.
age, we're trying to buy, thank you. We're trying to buy a house. We're trying to do all these things to start our lives. And JD Vance was speaking to a college audience at a Republican school, and he said, the reason why you cannot buy a house is because immigrants are coming into the country and they're buying the house that was meant for you. They're taking your American birthright. And what's interesting about this, as you sort of mentioned, is they've been in office now for a year. They deported thousands of people. Fact. Can't even deny it. The numbers are there. We see every day they're deporting people. Housing prices have only gotten more expensive. Rent has not decreased at all. So that tells me, and not even just me, tells anyone that's just barely paying attention. So their ideas on the economy and immigration are not working because if their idea about deportations was going to make the economy better and they've deported thousands of people, you would see rents go down. You would see it'd be a little bit easier to buy a house. You'd have more economic opportunity, but it's actually gotten worse. What you've seen is housing get more expensive. You've seen wages decrease. And the reality is the reason why it's hard to buy a house is because we have supply issue, but also corporations are going into neighborhoods, buying houses, using them as investment vehicles, and basically hoarding all the wealth for themselves. You're seeing this in New York City, and Zoran, I think, has done a great job about articulating a plan of how to build more housing and how to hold some of these corporations more accountable. And I'm curious to see if he can deliver, and hopefully he can. Um, but for Republicans, the idea of immigration is so central to them. And I think as Democrats refuse to articulate a message on this, Republicans only get stronger because my biggest fear is this, honestly, is that we go into the 26 election primaries, the Democrats do well, we're all excited. And then we go into a presidential primary and we continue to see these really bad ICE raids. And then you have a candidate that wins the Democratic primary. Let's say it's Gavin Newsom. Who knows who it's going to be? And he sees some polling that says that, oh, people are still concerned about the levels of immigration. It's this like weird poll that's done shadily, as many of them for moderate candidates are done. And then he goes on stage and JD Vance says, we've secured the border. Gavin Newsom, don't you understand that we secured the border? Why don't you say thank you to Donald Trump? And he goes, you have secured the border. You've done good there, but on other issues, you
Yep.
haven't done.
That,
And then he
that
starts to try
Rotimi,
to like,
I can write you the script. It's
mhm,
literally going to happen. And specifically,
yeah,
the man that you said, Gavin Newsom, he will flip
mhm,
on a dime, which is why he's not my guy. I give
same.
credit to politicians. Like you all said, I don't worship any of them. Gavin Newsom's the one, saw where the wind was blowing, said, I should throw the woke under the bus. And he did it.
Mm,
And much like Starmer, people turn on him. And then he's like, ooh, this was a bad political move. I now need to be a fighter. And now he's fighting, and people are like, that Gavin Newsom. This is who Gavin Newsom is. This is who the majority of the Democrats are. They'll flip on a dime, which is why I don't trust him. Now he's a fighter, but he wasn't a couple of months ago. He still sucks at the teat of corporate power. He still hasn't gone against Silicon Valley and the oligarchy, and he still refuses to talk about, Israel and APAC. So, do you really trust that guy as your fighter on immigration reform, or would you rather trust a person who comes out right now, throws the sticks and the staff in the sand, and says, "This is where I stand, win or lose." And this is what I'm going to articulate, and this is what I'm going to message on. And I don't have any faith in these cowards to message on this. You can change people's opinions, Rotimi. They're like, they
Hmm.
look at the poll and they go, change the
Stuck.
poll. Change the poll.
Yep.
Do what Chris Van Hollen did. Said, nope, give me proof of life. Why is Kilmar Abrego Garcia here? The Trump administration has deported him and all these innocent men, illegally. People are like, oh shit, I didn't vote for that. And he was Donald Trump. After that being in the news for 2 weeks, he was negative 19 on the deportation of
Mm,
Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Rotimi. Sorry for my rant.
wow.
You mentioned
No, no.
Newsom, but I know exactly that's what's going to happen in 2028, folks. What Rotimi said is
Yeah.
exactly what's going to happen.
And that scares me because then that person is going to get elected and they're going to do nothing about immigration. And then what you're going
Nope.
to see is you're going to see an influx at the southern border because whenever you have a Democratic president, there's kind of a global migration tide towards the United States because a lot of folks are under the impression from different countries that if you have a Democratic president, there's going to be more opportunity for them to migrate. And then what you're going to see is the same thing that happened with Biden. They're not going to be able to handle the chaos. They're not going to be able to handle the influx. And then Republican governors will then send migrants to different states. And you will then see the same exact thing happen again. And it's because they don't want to articulate a solution and they don't actually want to create a credible alternative. And then, God forbid, we're sitting here 4 months, or 8 years, how many ever years from now, and it's some other far right figure, and they're doing the same thing. And Democrats, again, it's like you have to articulate a credible alternative, or people are just going to pick the same crap.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate you writing this article and talking about this issue. I think, folks, this is it right now. By MAGA and Donald Trump have overreached in such a hideous, violent, illegal, xenophobic way that they have finally woken up a lot of Americans who went with the bullshit, right? And they're like, whoa, 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 that kid isn't a terrorist. My gardener isn't Al Qaeda. The person who works for me, that's just an immigrant trying to get by. This is mean. This is wrong. This is cruel. Zip tying children, children being separated from their families, white people being thrown to the ground for defending their community. I didn't sign up for this. And so you need someone right now. It's an opening. You need someone to finally come out and articulate this. Who will it be? I don't know. But I think not only will they be rewarded, I think they can single handedly finally pivot on this issue and create some lasting immigration reform. I also want to remind folks that Joe Rogan, of all people, Democrats love their liberal Joe Rogan. The universe gave him Zoran Mamdani, and they're like, let's destroy him. But I digress. Even Joe Rogan uh, said, you know, yeah, yeah, man, people who've been here for a while, kids who came here, like, what's the problem? Just give them a pathway to citizenship. He went on this long rant. So I think that's where most people are. Like, if you can make a differentiation between border security and a humane immigration reform, and then throw ICE under the bus and say, here's a better vision, people are like, yeah, that's much better than this vision. Like, the bar is really low, to me. All you need is someone with the courage to hop over it. I don't know if they'll do
Hmm.
this. I don't have faith in any of the Democratic leadership. It will require some new blood. I don't mean young. I said new. I don't want to be ageist because
Mm,
you can be
yeah.
old. You just need a fighting spirit. Elisa Slotkin's young. She's useless, according to me. So that's where I am at. Rotimi, fantastic conversation. I hope you could
No
come back.
problem. Yeah.
Rotimi has just started his Substack, American Pursuit. If you enjoyed our conversation and what he had to say, you have to subscribe to American Pursuit. Rotimi, also shamelessly promote yourself.
Yeah. Please, thank you for joining our conversation today. Follow my Substack at American Pursuit on Twitter. I'm at underscore Rotimi. And if you're annoyed with Twitter, like many people are, I don't blame you. I'm on Instagram at underscore Rotimi A. So thank you so much for having me today. And please follow me and let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah, there's about 1,500 people who tune in to a conversation about immigration reform, and ICE, which I'm glad most people don't. But Rotimi has some solutions about how Democrats can and should campaign on immigration reform. Now is the time. Again, for people who are joining us late, this will be up on my Substack and Rotimi's Substack. But there is an opportunity here, folks. Trump has literally made immigrants great again. It's the highest favorability rating Americans have for immigrants. ICE has this lowest favorability rating. Donald Trump is -5 to -11 on immigration, which means he's overreached. There is an opening here, folks. You just need courage. You need courage and you need fighters. This has been The Left Hook. Everything is free here without paywall because I'm a terrible capitalist. If you have some money, give it to Rotimi. He's 29 years old. He's engaged. He's trying to buy a house. And his Substack, American Pursuit. If you have a few dollars left over, as everyone knows, I have like 800 kids and 3 cats. So please, maybe I could feed one of the cats and three of the kids. Either way, just share the information and please, please, please be a subscriber. It's free and it's good information and just spread the word. People say, "Oh, who am I? I'm nobody." 7 to 8 million people came out in the No Kings rally. Whole bunch of people pressured Disney to bring back Jimmy Kimmel through an economic boycott. Target fired its CEO because people did an economic boycott and did a buy-in to Costco instead because Target went all in with anti-DEI. And we saw double-digit wins in New Jersey, New York, and also Virginia because the people have come out. People want reform. So put the pressure, put the pressure, put the pressure, folks. Thanks all for watching. Be kind. Take a break during the weekend. And please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Take care.
See you, everyone. Thanks.